fine. I'll tell you. I mean, if you want to know, look, the issue with ETH is if you want a decentralized network, you have to actually install a protocol, and it has to run unmolested, unmodified for 5 to 10 years before you can conclude that it is decentralized and censorship resistant. And ETH hasn't even got there yet. The clock on ETH won't start until after. The problem with ETH is after the merge, they've still left all sorts of questions. What's the issuance schedule going to be for the next 1,000 years? What are the staking rules? What are the, there's so much, there's such an ambitious technology agenda that the protocol never stops mutating. And the problem with an ever mutating DNA structure is you generally end up with a monstrosity, right? You can't keep mutating the protocol for obvious reasons. So ETH isn't really something that you could have an opinion on yet because they haven't stopped mutating it. If I had to have an opinion on what I see in front of me, what you see is this is something that was sold as an ICO to the public. The ETH Foundation, Ethereum Foundation controls it. It's an investment contract, right? It's been hard forked multiple times, and the hard forks aren't just hard forks to fix a fatal bug. They're hard forks that change the underlying monetary protocol, and the protocol keeps materially changing, and it is never stabilized. Right now, you've got an ETH mining constituency, and every year for the past 5 years, they've had a difficulty bomb to destroy it, and they keep putting it off. Well, who's they? The miners don't want to destroy themselves. So who's controlling the network? Not the miners, right? There's a small group of developers that control what the network is, and that's a company. It's a software company, and ETH is an equity, and they've sold it to the general public, and they keep changing the protocol. Hard forks are just software upgrades that are mandatory. So it's not a decentralized network. It's not a commodity. There's no reasonable person that understands the law or ethics could conclude that Ethereum is a commodity, right? You can't. Gary Gensler doesn't think it's a commodity. You can read his videos on it, right? It passes the Howey test as an investment contract. The question you got to ask yourself is who makes the decisions and what's the basis they make the decision, right? It doesn't help to vote on these things either, by the way. Like if you vote on them, companies vote on things. If the shareholders get a vote, that makes it a security, right? The only way to establish a commodity in cyberspace is someone has to follow Satoshi's example. The example is you create the software, you give it to the world with no economic motive, right? And the protocol is set forever and no one changes it. So if you're going to change it, like you could justify fixing a bug. But if someone hard forked Bitcoin to be 42 million coins instead of 21 million coins, or they hard forked it to change the issuance schedule, right? All of a sudden, you've centralized it. You reset the clock. It looks like something which is controlled by an entity, and now you have to wait a decade to figure out whether or not it's stabilized. And so I think the real issue with ETH is a decade after they finish changing it and screwing with it, you can have an opinion on it. But it doesn't look to me like they'll stop hard forking it for the next 3 years. Like the plan is to keep hard forking and hard forking. I'll give you a question. You stake your ETH. Okay, well, what's the yield schedule on the staked ETH for the next decade? And then when can you get your staked ETH out?
I don't know the answer to that, but I guess the question...
What? Nobody knows that. Nobody knows the answer to that.
Yeah,
there is no answer to that. No, so here's the problem. Right? If
you're saying there is no second best, Michael.
What I'm saying is you have to go back to first principles when you design a digital commodity. It needs to be a protocol that is like the Bitcoin protocol determines the amount of Bitcoin and the way it's issued and the way the network works for the next 1,000 years. And that protocol was established on Pizza Day when it traded for nothing. and it hasn't changed, right? So like some small change to make it more secure, maybe, but you can't keep changing the protocol. That's the problem. If you change the protocol, then you probably instantiated a security. And now the problem is, if it's a security, you're trading it illegally, right, on unregistered exchanges without a license to trade a security, and you haven't disclosed all the risk factors on the security. So it doesn't work as money, right? It's something different. If you want to create a software company and sell equity, then you do it pursuant to an IPO. Google did it, MicroStrategy did it, Microsoft did it, Oracle did it. There's an ethical way to do it. But it's not ethical and it's not legal to sell equity to the general public without a registration statement and without disclosing the risk factors. And it's not black and white. I mean, there's no gray here. I mean, I wish there was gray, but I mean, I don't see how anybody could look at it as being anywhere gray. I mean, if you actually take an objective view toward it, it just happened to be extremely diffused in the world. There's a lot of people with it. They've got that going for them.
Michael, would you not say, though, that the very nature of technology